All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to unpack a really powerful message that completely flips the script on how we think about work. See, it's not just about what you do for a living, it's about the why behind it. We're talking about the huge difference between having a job and having a calling.
So let me ask you, does this question hit a little too close to home? You know that feeling like you're just stuck on a treadmill, running in place, trapped in this cycle that's all about survival and not really about, well, living? The message we're breaking down today starts right there, tapping into that feeling that so many of us have. And this really is the modern trap the sermon talks about. Think about it. From the time we're kids, what's the advice? Get good grades, land a good, stable job, and just climb that corporate ladder. But according to this teaching, that whole system often leads to a life full of stress and anxiety because it's a system built for one thing and one thing only: survival, not purpose.
Okay, so if that's the trap we're all in, what's the way out? Well, the sermon says we have to go all the way back to the beginning. We need to look at what work was supposed to be.
And this is where things get really interesting. The whole perspective here is that when God put Adam in the Garden of Eden, work already existed. But it wasn't a chore. He didn't hand Adam a job application, right? He gave him an assignment. The idea is that work, in its original form, was all about joyful creation, about stewarding something beautiful. We were meant to be deployed on a mission, not just employed for a wage. But then something changed, and this is the critical turning point in the message. What was designed to be this incredible blessing, it became a burden. Work went from this purpose-driven, creative act to this painful, laborious grind, a man-made system where you're just fighting to get to that next paycheck. And that sets up the huge conflict we're about to dig into. So, because of that shift, we're now faced with two totally competing worldviews, two different ways of looking at our lives and our work. It's the job versus the calling. So on one side, you've got the world system, right? The job. And the sermon frames this as basically a race for survival. It's all about just getting by. But on the other side, you have the kingdom system, the calling, and that's presented as a path to actually thriving. See the difference? One is about striving and struggling. The other is about flourishing and living fully. And this also gets down to where you put your trust, your security. If you're in a job, you're depending on your boss, on the company, on the crazy ups and downs of the economy. But a calling, according to this message, shifts your dependence entirely. Your source, your provider, is God. And that's meant to completely remove that fear of what the stock market is doing tomorrow.
Then there's the timeline. Let's be real. Jobs are temporary. Layoffs happen. Companies go under. It's just a fact of life. But the argument here is that a calling, that's eternal. It's a purpose that no boss, no company, no circumstance can ever take from you. Why? Because it wasn't designed for a 40-year career. It was designed for eternity.
And this verse right here, this is pretty much the foundation for the entire argument. Seek first the kingdom of God. Basically, instead of chasing the job to get the money to buy the things you need, this principle says, no, you've got it backwards. Prioritize your divine purpose first, and everything else you need, the provision, will follow. It completely flips that work to survive model right on its head.
Okay, that all sounds amazing in theory, right? But how does this actually play out in real life? Well, the sermon gives some really powerful examples of this shift from just having a paycheck to living with purpose. And this next verse introduces a huge concept: your gift. The sermon argues that what really sustains you isn't your job title, it's your God-given gift. That unique, innate ability you have is what actually opens the doors and creates the real opportunities completely outside of any traditional career path. I mean, just look at these examples. Take Joseph. Was his job being a prisoner? No. His gift was interpreting dreams, and that's what took him from the prison to the palace. Or David. His gift for leadership was obvious way before he was ever a king, back when he was just a shepherd. And Daniel's gift of wisdom made him absolutely essential to entire empires. In every single case, it was their gift, not their job, that paved their way. And maybe the ultimate example of this whole shift is the story of the disciples. I mean, these guys had steady jobs. They were professional fishermen. That was their career. But when Jesus called them, he didn't offer them a better job with better benefits. He offered them a mission. They went from being employed in the world system to being deployed on a divine assignment. All right, so let's pull all these threads together. What's the final takeaway here? What is the big call to action from this sermon? It all comes down to this massive mindset shift. Instead of constantly asking, where can I find a job? The sermon challenges us to ask a totally different question. What problem am I here to solve? The argument is that real promotion, real advancement, doesn't come from just finding a vacant position. It comes from becoming the solution. Just think back to Joseph, Daniel, and David. They rose to the top because they could solve problems that nobody else could. And really, this is all about shifting from being a consumer to being a producer. See, an employee often just trades time for a wage. They're consuming time. But a person living in their calling, they're designed to produce, to create value, to multiply the talents they've been given. You know, just like in that famous parable. And this brings us full circle, all the way back to the beginning. The original plan wasn't for us to be mere laborers. It was for us to have dominion, to rule, to create, to have authority. So this means changing your identity from a worker who's just trying to scrape by to a ruler who is actively shaping their little corner of the world.
You know, a paycheck, it always has a limit. There's only so much you can earn. The sermon closes out its argument with this idea. There's a type of provision that comes not from our own grinding and effort, but from a divine blessing. And when you're walking in your purpose, the resources that come with it aren't tangled up with all the stress and sorrow that can come from just chasing money.
And that leaves us with the big question the sermon poses to every single one of us. There are two voices, two systems constantly competing for our attention. One offers a temporary job for survival. The other offers an eternal calling for purpose. So which voice are you going to listen to? Which path truly makes sense for your life? It's definitely something powerful to think about.